Money FM 89.3, the best of Saturday mornings. Singapore Homebrew on Money FM 89.3.
Welcome back. Joining me in the studio, Paul Quinn, the founder and group CEO of Westport Partners, talking about executive search and how to effectively work with executive search firms. Paul, good morning. Welcome to Money FM.
Good morning, Glenn. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. For most executives, just finding a job on their own has got to be a real challenge. You know, enter your firm and search firms that come in. What does the landscape look like these days for an executive who needs help from an executive search firm?
Yeah, it's a great question. It can be very daunting. The reality is that, unfortunately, when you're looking for a job, it becomes more difficult. When you're busy, you're successful in your career, that's typically when you're going to be headhunted. So what I say to a lot of professionals is you should look to try to establish relationships with great search firms, partners that are excellent at what you do in your industry. So I think that's stage one. But as you know, right now, the market's a little bit soft. It's a bit tough. Bonuses have been bad. You know, if you got an equal bonus to last year, you know, you should be relatively happy. But bonuses on average have been down 25 to 50%. So that's when you see people start moving. But sometimes I say, look, the grass isn't always greener. Don't be impetuous. Look at the landscape. Do your research. And if you've got a really great partner in a search firm, they'll be able to give you honest, genuine advice.
Is it, in many years, it's been really a job seeker's market. Is it a bearish time for that right now? Or because we see a lot of folks getting laid off, especially in the tech industry, financial services. You do a lot of work in that industry. It seems like every week we're seeing firms are retrenching people. Is it a bad time to be just getting rid of a current job and looking for a new one?
I would say don't be impetuous, right? Because what we've seen is, I've been doing this for 30 years. What goes up has to come down. And it's not easy right now. What I would say is the first thing is to kind of work backwards from what your end goal is. Because a lot of people in their jobs are unhappy. When I ask them why, quite often it's to do with politics, changes with management, or they're worried about what's around the corner. But as you know in life, if you outlast your colleagues or your managers, you might be safe. But I do think it's a time to be cautious and not to rush, because we've seen some banks recently, first in, last out. So that's
what do you mean by that?
Well, if you were hired in the last 6 months and the bank's gone through some financial losses, you could be cut. And, imagine if you've been in an organization for 10 years, you join an organization and within 6 to 12 months you're cut, not because you didn't perform, but because you were last in. Yeah. It's crazy.
No other reason other than that, just a timing issue. Yeah. Hey, if you've got questions for Paul Quinn on executive search, please throw them up on our WhatsApp. 65 is the country code, 88550893. The old adage that I've always believed is don't change jobs until you've got another job.
Yeah.
Don't just quit and then start looking for another job.
Yeah.
Is that I would think that holds true in this job environment today.
100%. If your positioning changes, unfortunately, when you're not working.
Yeah. As in you're desperate.
Yeah. Sometimes.
You got to have a job.
Sometimes. Ideally. But I think, there has to be a narrative behind it. So, look, if we break it down on what the process is, if you're employed, or you're unemployed, or you're proactively looking, you need to sit down as an individual and work out, okay, how am I going to position myself to someone who's a hiring manager? So if you apply for a job, it's a little bit different than if you've been headhunted. If you've been headhunted, you may not be looking to move.
Right.
And then I would suggest working with a search firm to make sure that the way that they position you is done correctly, because then you're positioned, with an advantageous strength positioning.
You've got leverage.
You need a little bit of leverage, right? Because the reality is the negotiation starts from the very first time you speak with the organization, with the search firm. So if you're working with a great search partner, they are working on your behalf, but also on the organization's behalf. So they're probably quite neutral. So as a candidate, you've got to be thinking, well, what do I want from this? And then typically what I will say is, when you're applying for a role or interviewing with an organization, trying to understand the tenure of the current management team there. Is it stable? Because the biggest dichotomy in our business today is that most CEOs that run a company today won't be in that job 5 years from now. They're up for re-election every year. They're not being measured, every 2-3 years. They're being measured annually, quarterly, which is a little bit scary. So when you're joining an organization, the key is to try to read the tea leaves to understand, okay, in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, will I still have a job? What will my market visibility be? And if I need to leave, am I in a position of strength?
What is a headhunter, and is that term still okay to use?
I love it.
Okay. You never know what's in vogue or not, right?
Yeah.
In terms of terminology. But what does a headhunter bring to the table, when you're working for an executive versus, let's say, a 20 or 25-year executive who's got plenty of experience and even good contacts in the industry, but what do you bring to the table for that person in terms of finding a job, negotiating the job? How is the calculus different when you actually get in the trenches looking for that next position?
Well, it's interesting. The majority of people will often move, especially early on in their career, based on their network. But if you've been working for 20, 25 years, the reality is you become more senior. The more senior you become, the fewer roles there are. So a great search firm will be able to give you some visibility in the marketplace, be able to introduce you to people beyond your network, and then hopefully give you some sage advice about where you could sit within an organization. The problem is that 90% of the time, I think, when roles are advertised, they've already been filled. It's cosmetic.
Exactly. They've got to do their due diligence for HR or whatever, right?
Yeah. So what I always find interesting, it's like this. If you are interested in real estate, if you don't have a handful of real estate agents that are bringing deals to you that are off market, then you're probably not in the right business. Same thing working with a search firm. Unfortunately, I don't think most professionals view headhunters in that way. They're not working with them correctly. So, when you're older, you might need a cardiologist at some point, a lawyer, maybe a divorce attorney. You need a headhunter in your Rolodex that will work with you throughout the course of your career, opening doors that may not exist otherwise.
You mentioned early on developing relationships with executive search firms. So how does one do that? If somebody, there's so many search firms out there, including Westport Advisors yourself. But how do you find the right one, and then how do you develop that relationship before you need your services?
So I think you do some research. So deductively, let's talk beyond banking, right? If you are interested in a certain organization, you need to find out whether or not there's an internal recruitment team or a headhunting firm, and which headhunting firm. And then when you speak to those people, you need to assess their credibility. Who have they placed in that organization? What is their visibility?
How can they find out that information?
So say you're interested in a particular organization and you speak to a few people, find out, which search partners do you work with, who placed you, who can you recommend? But it's as simple as picking up the phone and start doing the research, because it may not be visible online. Yeah. So you've got to dig deep. You've got to look to your network and find out. Then you've got to develop a relationship with those guys. And I think, again, that's massively overlooked. And, as a sales professional, as an entrepreneur and businessman, what I think is massively overlooked is inviting people for a cup of tea, sitting down, having a chat, getting to know people, and developing those long-term relationships. There has to be a strategic approach to it. So it's like this. If you want a mentor, it's not easy to find a mentor. You have to go out and strategically recruit one. It has to be someone that you care about, that they care about you. It's not always easy. So finding a search partner is not always easy. A lot of the best candidates are often headhunted and perhaps take it for granted. But those people on the rise may not have those relationships.
Yeah, one of our regular listeners, Kelly Teo, would like to ask, is it still rather difficult to get job placement for someone in their late 40s or early 50s? What are the chances of even getting interviews?
Hey, Kelly, I don't think, unless you're in your late 50s or early 60s, I don't think there's any bias. I think the reality is when you're in your 40s, early 50s, that is the most crucial time in your career. That's where you're going to make the most money. That's where your career is really cemented. Unfortunately, most people in their 40s now, I call it the sandwich decade, because you're busy looking after your parents who are aging. You may be having children. You have all these financial responsibilities. So you have to take that upon yourself. It's like listening to podcasts, listening to radio stations like today. You've got to be ahead of the curve. And if you're working with a great search partner, they will put you ahead of the curve in terms of job opportunities. Yeah. But yeah, it's not difficult.
Let's reverse engineer this, Paul. We're talking to Paul Quinn, the founder, group CEO of Westport Partners, about executive search. Reverse engineering this. You make your money taking a percentage of the deal that's made.
Yes.
Am I correct on
that? Yes.
Okay. So you want to represent the executives who have the best chance of being successful in finding their next job.
Yes.
So what do you look for when you're looking to work with executives? What qualities, what mindset, what are you looking for to in that person across the table from you to represent to other firms?
So as a general rule of thumb, if you imagine, I'll give you an example of a regular search. We may speak to as many as 60 people when we're mapping the market, and we'll reduce it maybe to the top 20 people. Then we'll physically meet with them, and then we'll reduce it maybe to 10 and present those 10. Maybe 5 or 6 are shortlisted, interviewed. But what I've recognized is of that top 10, academically, on paper, they will look very similar. They'll have studied at similar universities. So your personality, your ability to walk the floor, engage, ask great questions. I find very few people ask really credible questions. That really defines who you are. Most people don't do their research. You'd be surprised when someone's going for an interview, they don't do the research. I placed a CFO years ago, and who had his final interview, and I said, "Look, have you read the 2 last annual reports that I sent you?" And he said, "No." I said, "What are you doing? This is a job of your career, of your lifetime." Get to my office. I forced him to take the morning off work, printed the 2 annual reports, told him to highlight them, make lots of notes. And I let him borrow my briefcase and bring that to the meeting. So you have to be prepped.
Did you shine his shoes as well for him?
I made him shine his shoes.
But you're right. These little, not so little things, but these key things are really important. And when you're looking to identify those 60 or 30 or 10 people, are you looking at their LinkedIn profile to see, what their thought leadership profile is? Or, obviously their current job title is one that's important for you. But what do you look at around that person when you're doing your research on people that you'd like to represent?
Well, LinkedIn has changed the game, right? And obviously, if you are not very visible, it makes it a lot more difficult to find you. So a great LinkedIn account is so important. It's like, having a great suit when you go into a meeting. Yeah. The thing about most LinkedIns is they talk about the past and not the future. So if you're trying to articulate what you're potentially trying to do in a very subtle way, you don't want your bosses to know, it's so important to curate your LinkedIn and take the time to sit down and write it. And just like any great story, there should be a beginning, middle, and end. And the end is, what do you want to do next? What are you passionate about? And the other thing that makes people interesting is what they do outside of the office. Because what you do in the office sometimes can be a bit mundane. So if someone is a chess champion, a triathlete, or whatever, it gives them a little bit of an edge.
Yeah. And them posting things, reposting things, doing blogs, does all that add into what you look at for somebody? Are they really in touch with their industry, with their topics?
Yeah, it certainly helps because it gives a lot of credibility to that individual. But the reality is, I'm very old school. I'll pick up the phone, I'll try and do a video call, and I'll try to granularly understand what exactly that person does, because 3, 4, 5 bullet points isn't going to define them. But let's just say someone's in a media-facing role. They're the chief investment officer of an organization or a strategist. You're going to be able to look online at what their research papers are, what sort of media work have they done, and if they don't come across well, you're probably going to bypass them. Yeah. So it is important nowadays to have a digital footprint, for sure.
Let's talk about your podcast, Quintessential Questions. You very kindly had me on a month ago, I should say, on your podcast, very professionally produced. Why did you decide to start doing a podcast?
Well, it was for a few reasons. Number one, as a headhunter, we are the dirty little secret of a lot of candidates we work with. Unfortunately, they can't acknowledge who we are publicly because if their boss knows, they become worried. So unless we've placed you or you're a corporate client, we weren't getting a lot of exposure. And for a long time, we've been hidden. And I set up a career coaching business recently, and I think that's had major impact because the majority, just over 90% of the people my firm have placed in the last 18 years are still working where we placed them. But I realized we needed a bit of traction, and by doing that, I established myself as a center of excellence, and really, for the people that don't know me, they recognize, okay, this guy is established, he knows what he's doing, he's got a great bunch of guests. The stars of the show are the guests. So when I had you on the show, you've got such an interesting background and story. And beyond what your resume says, who are you? So we had one guy who's a CIO, used to be a math teacher, couldn't get an entrance into a bank, worked in a bar. People won't know these things, right? And I think that gives somebody a voice. And we learn about their career journeys. When you come to the end of your career, what do? We had another guest that became a patisserie baker. now an entrepreneur. So I think a lot of us that are looking to diversify our interest or maybe change career direction, that's what the podcast is all about, career journeys.
Yeah. What type of guests do you look for?
So we started off with private banking because that's what I specialize in. Yeah. But as an athlete and as a business person, I recognize that we're all interested in different things. So health, we're looking at people, that are doctors, fitness experts, sleep doctors, nutritionists. So that covers that one side of things. I love the world of entertainment. So, actors, directors, coaches in those areas. And I think that's all inextricably linked to what I do, which is partly coaching. You do coaching as well. Yeah. And I think anyone that's looking to further their career in any industry has to become multidimensional.
Yeah.
So we have all types of guests on.
What is the future? I mean, there's so many podcasts out there. It's really hard to stand out.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of podcasts that quite honestly, doing what we do on this show, which is interview people, doing what you do on Quintessential Questions. How do you stand out? How do you really make that mark in a very crowded space?
I'm still trying to work that out, but I think the key is doing your research on having the very best guests that you can have, topics that are relevant today, something that's punchy and dynamic. I've gone with a long format. Not everyone's going to listen to the full hour that we're doing a podcast, but I personally think the world's become a little bit too short term. Everything is 30 seconds, reels and 90-second reels on Instagram. But if you really look at your career, if you spend 10 years in a job and you're thinking about moving, where do you get that inspiration from? So I think it's really about doing all the small things really, really well, which we try to do.
Who's on your podcast this week? Or next week?
I've got
coming up.
Yeah, I've got a CEO of a real estate company. Very interesting guy. Tomorrow I've got one with an actor. So a stockbroker who turned YouTuber, who's turned actor and fighter.
Wow.
So he's had and it's so interesting how his career's pivoted. Yeah. So that's interesting. So yeah, lots of good people coming on the show.
Awesome. Paul, how do people find you at Westport Partners? How do people find you on Quintessential Questions? What's the best way for them to connect?
Well, thanks so much. So the website is www.westport-partners.com. All my details are there, including the podcast. So anyone that's looking to reach out and get a sense of where they stand in the market, how to negotiate compensation, we can help you with all of that.
Beautiful. And the podcast?
It's called The Quintessential Questions, and our website is linked to our executive search and career coaching website.
One final question from our listener, Ian. Is ageism a myth or truth? Do employers prefer younger ones versus older job seekers?
I think the answer is it's very real, but I think if you come under a really great CEO who's a visionary, they don't care if you're 45, 55, 65. I think the people that are a little bit wet behind the ears probably are ageist. But the great leaders out there realize people are living longer, and if you haven't been through 2 or 3 recessions, truly, what value can you add? So I think there's still there's a space for some of us old timers.
Good news from Paul Quinn, founder and group CEO of Westport Partners. Thanks for being with us today,
Glenn. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.